The snow wasn't falling so much as cutting through the air, sideways and fast, like the sky had grown tired of carrying its own grief. It lashed against the cracked windows of Millbur Station, whizzing through gaps where the glass had long since given up. The place was supposed to be closed, a relic from another age, but construction had forced trains to pass through here again, if only briefly. Its old grandeur was buried now beneath dust and drafts, its cavernous hull echoing with nothing but the hum of flickering lights and the crunch of ice. Milton Kane stood there, collar pulled tight, irritation sharp in his chest. Not because of the cold, though the chill had already bitten past the fine wool of his coat, but because the train was late. Wasting time had always been his greatest enemy. He lived in a world where minutes were money, where silence in a boardroom could swing millions. Here, in this forgotten corner of the city, silence meant something else. It felt like guilt, like a secret left to rot. He shifted his polished shoes against the slush-streaked tiles, already despising how the filth clung to leather that had never been meant for weather. He didn't belong here, not in this tomb of neglect, and every minute stretched his disdain. Thinner than he heard it dot. At first he thought it was the wine thin, almost mocking, seeping through cracks like a voice that wanted to be forgotten. But then it came again, a whimper, small, fragile, human. Milton froze, head tilted, heartbeat slowing to listen. This was no trick of air. It was the sound of something alive, something suffering. The echo pulled him forward. His footsteps pressed into the hush, leather soles crunching against patches of fresh snow that had slipped inside through a broken door. He moved past a vending machine scarred with graffiti, its glass shattered, its coils frozen in mid-turn like a mouth refusing to feed. The yellow light above it flickered as though reluctant to keep watch, and there she was, a little girl, curled up on the hard concrete beneath that dying bulb, no more than 4 years old. Her green coat sagged on her, 2 sizes too big, sleeves frayed and damp from melted snow. Yellow boots stuck out, scuffed and soft from wear. Her socks peeking through at the ankles. Blonde hair was pulled back into a crooked ponytail, strands escaping to cling to her tear-streaked face. Her eyes lifted to him, blue, wide and ancient with exhaustion. Not fear, not anymore. Just the hollow weight of a child who had been afraid for too long. She didn't scream, didn't scramble away. She simply pulled her knees tighter, as though the small space she occupied could still shrink smaller, keep her safe from whatever hunted her. Her voice came like a cracked whisper. Please don't let them find me. The words hung in the cold air, brittle and breaking. Milton, the man who once stared down investors like predators and rebuilt collapsing empires in less than a year, felt himself stagger under the weight of them. Nothing had ever made him feel smaller than that single plea. Slowly, carefully, he crouched down. His body, tailored and sharp in a world of power, shrank until his eyes met hers at level ground. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Milton Kane bent not for a board, not for profit, but for a child clutching a rabbit with one arm, her knuckles wide against its torn fabric. Hey, he said softly, the sound almost foreign, in his own mouth. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. The girl didn't move closer, but she didn't move away either. Trust wasn't given, it was measured in inches. And in that flickering moment, Milton Kane took his first step into a darkness he couldn't yet name, already changed by a whisper in the cold. The snow outside was building into walls, muffling the city's usual noise until the night felt like it belonged only to them. Inside the abandoned station, the silence that followed Luna's plea clung to Milton like a second skin. Her words had carved into him, sharp as glass. Please don't let them find me. For a long moment, he didn't move. He simply crouched there, eye level with this fragile figure wrapped in a coat too big for her bones. His instincts screamed at him to call someone, police, child services, anyone trained to handle this kind of thing. That's what rational men did. That's what Milton Kane, CEO, problem solver, fixer, was supposed to do. Yet his hand, hovering over the phone in his pocket, didn't rise. Something about the way her tiny body trembled, without moving, told him that the wrong call could do more damage than the cold ever would. What's your name? He asked quietly. She blinked, hesitant, her fingers gripping the stuffed rabbit tighter, its fabric worn so thin it looked like it had survived 100 storms already. Luna, she whispered. He tried a small smile. That's beautiful. I'm Milton. She gave no reply, just pulled her knees in closer, eyes darting to the shadows beyond him, as if expecting someone to step out of them. Milton followed her gaze, scanning the platform. Nothing, just broken benches, peeling posters, and that flickering yellow light casting restless shadows. Still, his pulse had quickened. He'd spent years recognizing predators in business, the men who smiled with knives hidden behind their teeth. This wasn't that world. And yet, the air here carried the same tension, the same sense of eyes watching from unseen corners. "Are you lost, Luna?" he asked. Her head shook, strands of blonde hair falling loose. "I ran away." The words were matter of fact, delivered with the quiet finality of someone twice her age. "From where?" He pressed gently, her lips parted, then closed. For a heartbeat she looked like she might trust him. But the weight of her truth was heavier than her small frame could carry. Finally, she murmured, "They don't know I'm gone yet. If they find out, they'll be really mad." A chill crawled up Milton's spine, colder than the snow pressing in around them. Who will be mad? Luna's eyes flicked again toward the dark. Her voice cracked when she answered, "The people I live with. They're not my real mom and dad." Milton's breath caught in that instant. The polished floors of boardrooms, the towering glass of skyscrapers, the empire he had built, it all felt meaningless against the fragile truth in front of him. "Where are your real parents?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed with a trembling hand toward a bench tucked against the far wall. Milton rose slowly, wary of spooking her, and walked toward it. A small red suitcase sat jammed beneath the wood, its zipper broken, fabric fraying. A stuffed rabbits are poked out, half hanging, as though even it was desperate to escape. He crouched again, turning back to her. "This is yours?" Luna nodded once. Milton studied the case. Too small for anything but a handful of clothes, maybe a toy or two. Certainly not a life. It was the suitcase of someone who had left in a hurry, or someone who had learned that all they owned could be carried in one hand. "Do you know where your house is?" he asked. Another nod. "Then why don't you want to go back?" This time her silence stretched longer, heavy with secrets. When she finally spoke, it was almost inaudible. "Because Jonah is still there." The name stilled him. "Who's Jonah?" Her eyes softened, almost breaking. The first true emotion he'd seen flicker through her mask of exhaustion. "My baby brother." Milton swallowed hard. Her story was unraveling now, each thread darker than the last. This wasn't a lost child in the snow. This was a soldier, 4 years old, fighting a war no child should ever have to fight. Before he could speak again, a sound cut through the station. Not the wind, not the snow. A faint scrape, like a shoe against concrete. Milton turned his head. Sharply, eyes narrowing into the shadows. Nothing moved. No one stood there. Just the flickering light and the restless sigh of winter. Yet Luna's fingers tightened around the rabbit until it seemed threatened to burst. "They're looking for me," she whispered, voice trembling. Milton felt something inside him shift. An iron resolve replacing his hesitation. He had no idea who they were, but the fear in her tone was real, raw, and ancient. And for the first time in years, Milton Kane, the man who had bent for no one, felt himself bend completely. He crouched again, lowering his voice until it was steady as stone. "You're safe with me, Luna. I won't let them find you." Her wide, searching eyes held his for a long moment, and then, as if testing the weight of his promise, she whispered the one thing that cut deeper than the cold. "They hurt Jonah when I cry." Milton's heart clenched, his breath catching in his chest. The snow outside pressed harder against the glass, the world holding its breath in that forgotten station with shadows closing in. He understood this wasn't just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a war he could never walk away from. The train never came. Not that it mattered anymore. Milton Kane, who had spent his life measuring time in minutes and money in millions, had stopped counting altogether. The only thing that mattered now was the girl in the oversized green coat, the one sitting on a bench in an abandoned station with fear stitched into her every breath. Snow battered the cracked windows, louder now, a steady percussion of ice against glass. It gave the illusion of safety, like the storm itself was building walls to hide them, but Milton knew better. A storm could cover tracks, but it could also bury them. He offered Luna his hand once more. This time she didn't take it, but she did stand, clutching the red suitcase by its broken handle. That small movement, a child choosing to rise, felt heavier than anything Milton had ever lifted. Together, they walked out of Millbur Station into a night painted white with snow dot. His car waited on the curb, sleek and black, utterly out of place in the decaying neighborhood. He opened the door. Gently, letting Luna climb in first. She sat stiffly, rabbit in her lap, eyes glued to the window as though she expected shadows to peel away from the snowbunks and drag her back. Inside the warmth of the car, Milton finally asked, "Who's Jonah?" "My brother," she said simply, her voice thin but steady. "He's only 2. He cries a lot. They don't like that. They." "Claire and Tom?" Luna nodded, her hands tightening around the rabbit's ears. "When Jonah cries, they lock him in a room with no lights. They say boys have to be tough." Her voice faltered, and her eyes glistened. "But he's just little. He doesn't know how to be tough yet." Milton gripped the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his hands. He had faced hostile takeovers, lawsuits designed to destroy him, enemies who would bleed him dry for sport. None of that had prepared him for this, a child describing cruelty so casually, as if it were the weather. "And when you cry?" he asked, his throat tight. She swallowed, staring straight ahead. "They pour water on me, cold, or give me medicine that makes me sleepy." The words sat in the air like poison. Milton's chest burned, not with the cold, but with fury. A fury he hadn't felt in years. The city blurred past the windows as he drove, his mind racing. Who were these people? How had they slipped through every crack of the system? He'd read articles before, stories buried in the back pages about foster homes gone wrong, about children lost in paperwork. But seeing and hearing it through the trembling voice of a 4-year-old was something else entirely. When they arrived at his penthouse, the contrast hit him like a blade. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lights. Glass walls looked out across the city, towers glowing against the storm. It was sterile, perfect design for a man who had everything but warmth. Luna stepped inside cautiously, suitcase dragging. She didn't marvel at the space. She didn't even remove her boots. She simply walked to the corner of the living room, sat on the carpet, and folded herself into silence. Milton stood over her, suddenly ashamed. All his wealth, all his empire. And yet here was a child who looked smaller in his home than she had in the station. It didn't feel like a refuge. It felt like a showroom, empty of the one thing she needed most. He fetched a blanket from the guest room and draped it gently round her shoulders. She didn't flinch. That tiny lack of resistance felt like progress trust measured not in miles, but in inches. Later, as the storm raged outside, Milton sat in the hallway outside the guest bedroom. Luna lay curled on the bed, rabbit pressed against her, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Just before sleep took her, she whispered through the dark, "Please, don't let them find me. If they find me, they'll take Jonah away. And I'm the only one who sings to him when he cries." Milton sat frozen, the words gnawing at him. He had armies of lawyers at his disposal, connections that reached into government and finance. But none of that told him how to protect the child, who was terrified of being found. None of that told him how to save Jonah. His phone buzzed in his hand. A message, a known number. "Stop looking, or you'll lose more than you think." Milton's blood turned to ice. His eyes flicked toward the guest room, to the faint sound of Luna's shallow breathing. Whoever had sent that message already knew. They knew he had her. He stood, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled beneath him. The storm blurred the skyline, lights distorted into streaks. Somewhere out there, in that vast sprawl, people were waiting, watching. Honey. Milton Kane, who had built his empire by never bending, realized he was standing at the edge of something far bigger than a single act of kindness. This wasn't a rescue. This was a war. And the moment he heard Luna whisper her brother's name, he knew he had already chosen his side. But he also knew something else. Something colder than the snow pressing against the glass. Claire and Tom weren't alone. The shadows that had stolen Luna's childhood were part of something larger, something organized. And the more he pulled at that thread, the more likely it was that everything he knew would unravel. Behind him, Luna stirred in her sleep, a faint whimper escaping her lips. Milton clenched his fists, jaw set. For the first time in his life, he wasn't planning a strategy for profit. He was planning for war. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the city glazed in ice. But Milton Kane felt no sense of calm. The night had stretched along, his mind restless. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Luna's voice. They hurt. "Jonah, when I cry." He sat in the living room, untouched coffee cooling beside him, while Luna padded in from the guest room, clutching her rabbit. She looked smaller in the daylight, the bruises of exhaustion clearer under her eyes. For a moment, She just stood there, watching him like a soldier waiting for orders. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely. He had food delivered: pancakes, scrambled eggs, apple slices arranged neatly on the plate. She stared at it all as though unsure whether it was really meant for her. Then, in a voice that trembled at the edges, she whispered, "Can I see Jonah today?" The question hit Milton like a blade. She wasn't asking for toys, or comfort, or even safety for herself. She was asking for her brother. It was both the most natural request a child could make and the most impossible. "I'm trying," he said gently, choosing each word like glass underfoot. "I promise we'll see him soon, but we have to do it the right way, so no one can take him away again." She bit her lip, looking down at her rabbit. "If they know I ran, they'll be mad. They'll hurt him more." Her voice broke on the last word. Milton leaned forward, his chest heavy. "Luna, listen to me. I won't let them. Not ever again." Later that day, his lawyer called with news. A supervised visit had been arranged. Jonah was in temporary care, safe but fragile. Luna could see him, but only under watch. Milton agreed instantly. The center sat on the edge of the city, an old building with sterile walls painted in warm colors. That failed to mask the chill of bureaucracy. The waiting room hung with force cheer, posters about new beginnings, plastered beside locked doors. Luna's small hand gripped his tightly as they walked inside. Milton could feel the tremor in her fingers, the pulse of her fear. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence screamed louder than words. The door opened. Jonah sat inside a small room, perched on a chair too big for his tiny frame. He was even smaller than Milton imagined, barely 2, with fine hair sticking up in soft tufts and eyes wide with confusion. His little fist clutched a teddy bear so worn it looked older than him. When he saw Luna, his face cracked into a fragile smile. She ran forward, arms wrapping around him. And for the first time Milton saw her drop her fear, if only for a moment. She kissed his hair, whispering words only siblings could understand, rocking him gently as though she could shield him from every shadow. Milton's chest tightened. He had seen reunions before, families reconnected after decades, investors reunited with fortunes they thought lost, but nothing compared to this. This was raw. This was real. This was love in its purest, most desperate form. Then the door creaked again. Milton turned, and his body went rigid. A woman stepped inside, her smile to smooth, her eyes to sharp. She carried herself with the practiced poise of someone who had rehearsed being harmless. Her coat was neat, her hair tied back in a severe bun. But there was something in the set of her jaw that spoke of cruelty well hidden. "Claire," Milton murmured under his breath, though he had never seen her before. He just knew. Her gaze slid over the children, then locked on him. "And who are you?" she asked. Voice coated with sugar that soured instantly. Milton rose slowly, every inch of him humming with restrained fury. "Someone who cares about these children." Her smile sharpened. "How sweet. But you don't know anything about this family." Luna froze. Jonah whimpered softly, burying his face in her shoulder. Milton took a step closer, voice steady but hard. "I know enough. I know they're terrified of you. I know what happens when Jonah cries, and I know it ends now." Claire's eyes flashed just for a moment, a crack in the mask. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Then her lips curled into something like amusement. "Be careful, Mr. Kane. You have no idea what you're stepping into." The air thickened with tension, silence stretching until it snapped under Jonah's sudden sob. Luna rocked him, whispering frantically, tears streaking down her cheeks. Milton felt his hands curl into fists. A guard stepped in, sensing the shift. But Claire only adjusted her coat, her smile returning. "We'll be seeing each other again," she said softly, almost like a promise. Then she turned and walked out, leaving the door ajar, her perfume lingering like smoke. Milton's heart hammered. He had faced men who could ruin entire industries with a signature, but never had he felt this specific kind of dread, the dread of a predator cloaked in civility, protected by shadows. When the visit ended, Luna clung to Jonah until she was pulled away, screaming his name, her rabbit falling to the floor in the struggle. Milton picked it up, his throat burning. He looked at her, this child who had asked for nothing but her brother, and knew something had to break. That night, back in his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly below, his phone buzzed again. A new message. "Stop now. You're already too close." He stared at the words. His reflection ghosted in the glass behind them. for the first time in years. Milton Kane wasn't thinking about wealth or legacy. He was thinking about war. War for 2 children and maybe for more he hadn't met yet. And as the shadows pressed closer, one truth crystallized in him, hard and unshakable. Claire and Tom weren't just cruel caretakers. They were part of something vast, something designed to disappear children without leaving a trace. Luna's voice echoed in his head as he set the rabbit gently on her pillow that night. "Please don't let them find me," Milton whispered into the dark, his vow steady and absolute. Not ever again. The city didn't sleep, but Milton Kane had stopped caring about its rhythms. His world had narrowed to 2 names, Claire and Tom, and 2 children. One trembling in his guest room, the other crying in the dark somewhere he couldn't reach. Every deal he had ever closed, every boardroom battle he had ever won, felt meaningless compared to the war unfolding in whispers around him. Detective Harris called just after dawn. His voice was clipped, weighed down by something grim. "We found it," he said. "The house with the blue walls. The one Luna mentioned." Milton's breath caught. "It's real, real," Harris confirmed. "And worse than you think. Neighbors reported strange comings and goings. Children seen at night, then never seen again. Doors locked, windows covered. We've been watching it for 2 days. We're moving tonight." Milton looked toward the guest room. Luna was still asleep, rabbit tucked under her chin, her small face soft in the dim light. He knew what he had to say. "I'm coming," he told Harris. The detective hesitated. "Kane, this isn't a boardroom. This is a raid. Dangerous. Stay out of it." But Milton's voice was steady, unflinching. "I need to be there. For Luna. For Jonah. For every child in that house." Harris swore under his breath. "But he didn't. Are you? Fine. But you follow my lead. One mistake, and it won't just be you who pays." Night fell heavy, the sky smeared with clouds that swallowed the stars. Snow lay crusted on the ground, crunching under boots as Milton followed Harris and his team to the end of a narrow street. The house sat there like a wound in the neighborhood 2 stories tall, paint peeling. Its walls once blue, now sickly pale beneath the streetlights, curtains drawn tight. No sound, no movement, yet the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Milton's pulse pounded. He could smell damp wood, rust, something else underneath, something sour, like secrets left to rot. "Stay behind us," Harris whispered, raising his hand. The officers moved like shadows, weapons drawn, their silence more chilling than any shout. They breached the door with a crack that echoed down the empty street. The house seemed to shudder as if resenting the intrusion. Milton stepped inside after them, the air thick with mildew and dust. The wallpaper peeled in long strips. The floor groaned beneath their weight. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a trap. The living room was bare. A single couch, cushions stained. Children's shoes lined neatly by the wall, mismatched to small. Milton's stomach turned. They moved deeper. A locked door yielded to a crowbar, revealing a kitchen stripped of warm dishes piled high. The smell of decay choking the air. Then came the basement. Harris gave a signal, and 2 officers pried at the heavy door. A metallic clang, then the hinges gave. The door creaked open, and the smell that rolled out made Milton's throat tighten. Dampness, fear, and something chemical. Flashlights cut into the dark. Milton froze, there, in the corner, on a filthy mattress. A child no older than 5 sat curled, knees to chest, eyes huge in the beam of light. His face was streaked with dirt, lips cracked from thirst. But his eyes, they flickered with something fragile. Hope. The boy flinched at the sudden light, then whimpered. Milton dropped to his knees, ignoring Harris's warning hand. His voice was low, steady, the same tone he had used with Luna in the station. "It's okay. You're safe now." The boy blinked at him, then reached out with trembling fingers, and then another cry echoed higher, thinner from behind a false wall. Officers swung their lights, revealing seams in the plaster, a hidden door. They tore it open. Milton's breath caught inside. More children, 6, some older, some barely toddlers, all pale, frightened, their bodies too thin for their age. One clutched a doll with missing arms, another pressed his hands over his ears. Rocking silently, the air filled with quiet sobs, gasps too weak to be screams. Milton's vision blurred. He had read about monsters before, men who hid behind contracts and loopholes. But this was something darker, not profit-driven, not accidental. This was deliberate cruelty. "Get them out," Harris ordered, voice breaking. "Now." The Children were led upstairs, wrapped in blankets, their faces dazed in the harsh light. Milton followed, his chest burning, his fists clenched tight. But in the chaos, his eyes caught something in the hallway. A door, slightly ajar. He pushed it open, a study, desk littered with papers, file folders stacked high, photographs clipped together with rubber bands. Milton stepped closer, his hands shaking as he flipped through them, images of children, names, dates, numbers scrawled in the margins. It wasn't just Luna and Jonah. It wasn't just this house. It was a network. Behind him, Harris cursed softly. "This is bigger than we thought." A shout rang out from the living room. Officers dragged the figures inside, wrists bound. Milton's heart stopped. Claire and Tom. Claire's smile was gone, replaced with venom. She looked straight at him, eyes glittering cold. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed. "You don't know who you're fighting," Tom sneered, lips curling. "We're not the beginning, Kane. We're barely the middle." Milton stepped forward, fury blazing in him. "You're finished." Claire laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "You think this ends with us? You just painted a target on your back, and hers." Her eyes flicked toward Luna, who wasn't even there. But somehow Milton felt her name vibrate in the air like a curse. The officers pulled them out, their threats trailing behind like smoke. Milton stood in the ruin of the house, his breath heavy, his chest tight. He looked at the children being carried into vans, their fragile frames silhouetted against flashing lights, and something in him shifted permanently. This wasn't about money anymore, or duty, or even justice. This was personal, because as the last child was led into safety, Milton remembered Luna's trembling words. "If they find me, they'll take Jonah away. I'm the only one who sings to him when he cries." Now he knew the truth. It wasn't just Jonah. It was dozens, maybe hundreds. And Milton Kane, the man who once built empires from ashes, now knew his life's next battle, burning this shadow network to the ground. But as he walked out of the house with blue walls, snow swirling around him, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A new message. "You saved a few, but you've made enemies you can't see. Stop now, or the children won't be the only ones to disappear." Milton looked back at the house, at the broken walls that had hidden so much pain, and clenched his jaw. He had never bent before. He would not bend now. The war had only just begun. Snow had stopped falling, but the city felt heavier than ever. The rain on the blue-walled house was already making whispers across news outlets, reduced to neat headlines that could never hold the weight of what Milton Kane had seen inside. Words like illegal adoptions and rescue operations scrolled across television screens, detached and clinical, while the real scars sat etched in the eyes of children who hadn't learned how to speak. Their pain. In his penthouse, Milton sat across from Luna and Jonah. The boy had been released into his care temporarily, his small body still trembling at sudden noises, his eyes darting to corners as if expecting shadows to crawl out. Luna never left his side. She held him close, singing softly when he whimpered, her voice cracked but steady. The sound pierced Milton deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. "Are they gone now?" Luna asked suddenly, looking up at him with those two old eyes. Milton hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to hand her certainty like a gift, to stitch up her wounds with a promise. But the message still burned in his pocket. "You saved a few, but you've made enemies you can't see." He couldn't lie. Not to her. "They're gone for now," he said carefully. "But there are others, and we're going to stop them, too." Her arms tightened around Jonah. She didn't ask how. She didn't ask if he could really keep that promise. She just nodded, as though she had already chosen to believe him because believing was the only thing holding her together. That night, Milton found himself pacing the apartment. His lawyer had warned him. Claire and Tom weren't just criminals. They were connected. Judges could be bought. Cases could vanish, and the network was larger than anyone had guessed. "If you push too hard," she had said, her voice taut with worry, "you'll make yourself a target. They'll come for you, Milton, and for the children." He had stared at her through the phone, his jaw set. Then let them come. But the truth was harsher in the dark hours of night. He could hire guards, install cameras, buy protection. But shadows didn't follow the rules of wealth. Shadows slipped in through cracks money couldn't seal. 3 days later, he learned just how deep the shadows ran. Detective Harris arrived at his penthouse with a folder under his arm, his face more grave than Milton had ever seen. "We dug deeper," he said without preamble. "Claire and Tom were just handlers. The network, It's structured, layers upon layers, shell companies, charities as covers. They've been moving kids through the system for years, and the worst part, he dropped the folder onto the table. Photographs spilled out. Bank records, names. They have friends in places they shouldn't. Judges, lawyers, even some child welfare workers, people who look the other way for money, or worse. Milton felt the floor tilt beneath him. He had expected criminals, thugs. In the shadows, he hadn't expected suits and ties. People who shook hands in daylight while selling children in the dark. And this? Harris slid another photograph across, a grainy still from a surveillance camera. A man standing at the edge of a street, coat collar pulled high, eyes fixed on Milton's building. Cold eyes. Luna's words came back, chilling him. He's been watching me, waiting. Milton gripped the photograph, his knuckles whitening. Who is he? We don't know yet, Harris admitted, but he's careful, never close enough to catch. Just close enough to remind you he's there. Milton looked toward the guest room where Luna and Jonah slept, their small forms curled together. His chest tightened. He wasn't imagining it. They were being watched. That night, Milton barely moved from the living room window. The city glittered below, but every shadow between the towers felt like a hunter's gaze. He thought about the message on his phone, about the children's files he had seen on that desk, about the hundreds of names that hadn't yet been found. He thought about Luna's fragile voice when she asked if they were safe, and he knew safety wasn't enough. Not anymore. The attack came sooner than he expected. It was past midnight when a sudden crack shattered the silence. Glass splintered across the marble floor. Milton jerked up, instincts kicking before thought could form. He rushed toward the sound. Jonah crying, Luna's sharp gasp, heart pounding like a war drum. A rock lay on the floor, wrapped in paper, scrawled words in thick black ink. You're not their father. Stay out, or the next window won't be empty. Luna clung to Jonah, shielding him with her small frame, her eyes wide with terror. Milton knelt beside her, steadying his breath even as fury boiled inside him. He picked up the note, crumpling it in his fist. He had thought wealth made him untouchable. He had thought influence gave him power. But standing there, glass crunching under his shoes, children trembling in his arms, Milton Kane realized something brutal. This was no longer about boardrooms or headlines. This was war in its rawest form, and wars demanded more than strategy. They demanded sacrifice. The next morning, Milton made a decision that startled even himself. He gathered Luna and Jonah at the breakfast table. The smell of pancakes filled the air, though neither child ate much. Luna's eyes flicked nervously to the window still patched with boards. I need you to listen carefully, Milton said. His voice was low, steady, the kind of tone that belonged to a man about to gamble everything. There are people who don't want us to be together. People who want to hurt you, hurt Jonah. But I won't let them, not ever. Do you understand? Luna stared at him. But they'll find us, she whispered. Milton reached across the table, resting his hand gently over hers. Then let them find me instead. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. And for the first time, Milton felt the full weight of her trust pressing into him, not in inches anymore, but in leaps. Detective Harris wasn't pleased when Milton arrived at the precinct later that day, folder in hand. I want in, Milton said. You're already into deep, Harris countered. Stay out before you get killed. Milton opened the folder, spreading out photographs, bank transfers, names he had pulled from the Blue House files. His empire had always thrived on information. Now, he would use it for war. You said they have layers, Milton said, voice like steel. Then we peeled them back, one by one. I have the resources. You have the reach. Together, we end this. Harris studied him, seeing not a businessman anymore, but a man transformed. If you go down this path, he warned, there's no turning back. Milton's jaw tightened. He thought of Luna singing to Jonah in the dark. He thought of the children's wide, haunted eyes in the basement. He thought of the note on his floor, the cold eyes in the photograph. There was never a path back. He said quietly, that night, as the city lights burned like scattered stars. Milton stood at the window once more. Luna and Jonah slept safely behind him, but the war outside was only beginning. His phone buzzed with another message, a single line that made his blood run cold. You think you saved her, but she was never the one we wanted. Milton's breath caught, the words searing into him. If not Luna, then who? He stared at the children in the next room. Their fragile bodies curled in innocent sleep, and knew one thing with absolute clarity. The shadows were closer than ever, and if he wanted to keep them from swallowing Luna and Jonah, he would have to step fully into the darkness himself. This was no longer protection. This was war. The night was too quiet. That was the first thing Milton noticed as he stood at the window of his penthouse. City lights glittering far below like a million indifferent eyes. The storm had passed days ago, but the silence it left behind lingered, heavy and unnatural. It was the silence of a city holding its breath. Behind him, Luna and Jonah slept curled together on the guest bed, the rabbit tucked between them like a sentinel. He had stood watch every night since the raid, phone buzzing with messages that never seemed to stop, threats, warnings, veiled promises. And then that last one, the one he couldn't shake. You think you saved her, but she was never the one we wanted. He had replayed those words endlessly, searching for meaning, but in his gut, he already knew. The target had never been Luna, it had always been Jonah. Detective Harris confirmed it the next morning. His voice was flat, grim, as though speaking the truth might summon it closer. The files we pulled from Claire and Tom's house, they had Jonah listed separately, not with the others, marked with a symbol I've only seen once before. It means he was valuable, special. Milton's chest tightened. Special how? Harris shook his head. We don't know yet, but the network wanted him, and they won't stop just because we shut down one house. Milton thought of Jonah's small hands clutching his teddy bear, his wide eyes searching the room like a rabbit waiting for a hawk. The boy wasn't special because of what some monsters saw in him. He was special because he was alive, because he was Luna's, and because he was his, too. Whether he had the right to claim that or not, they're not getting him, Milton said, voice low, steady as steel. You can't keep them both hidden forever, Harris warned. This network has resources, eyes in places you don't expect. They'll come for him, Kane. They already are. Milton didn't flinch. Then, let them come. The attack happened 2 nights later. It started with the power cutting out. One moment the penthouse gleamed with its usual sterile light. The next it plunged into darkness. The hum of electricity silenced. Jonah woke first, his thin wail slicing through the dark. Luna's voice followed, whispering frantically, trying to calm him. Milton was already moving, flashlight in one hand, the other reaching for the pistol Harris had insisted he keep close. The beam cut through the shadows, slicing across the glass walls. Outside, beyond the glittering city, a red dot danced briefly on the window before disappearing, a sniper's sight. His blood froze. Luna, he barked, stay down, don't move. She obeyed instantly, pulling Jonah with her to the floor, shielding his small body with her own. Milton's chest constricted at the sight, a child protecting a child, both of them too small for the weight of the world pressing against them. A phone buzzed in the dark. His phone. He snatched it up, the screen glowing cold blue. A message, hand, over the boy, tonight, or the girl watches him die. His hands trembled for the first time in years. The network wasn't bluffing. They were inside his walls, inside his life. And the only thing standing between them and victory was him, Milton Kane, who had built empires with iron logic, who had destroyed rivals with nothing but words, now found himself cornered in his own home. And for the first time in his life, the battlefield wasn't numbers or contracts. It was life and death. The next hours blurred. Harris and his team arrived, sweeping the building. But the attackers had vanished like smoke. All they left behind was a message. The red dot burned into Milton's memory, and the knowledge that time was running out. He sat in the living room long after the children had fallen asleep again, his body heavy, his mind aflame. He had the resources of a millionaire, but the shadows had something stronger: patience, ruthlessness, silence. And yet, in the middle of that silence, a small voice cut through. Milton. He turned. Luna stood in the doorway, rabbit dangling from her arm, her eyes glistening in the faint light. Why are they after Jonah? She asked softly. Milton swallowed hard. Because they think he's important to them. They're wrong. He's important to us. Her lip trembled. What if they take him? He stood, crossing the room, kneeling before her the way he had in that abandoned station the night they met. His hands rested gently on her shoulders. They won't. Because I won't let them. She studied him, eyes wide, ancient with the kind of trust no child should have to give. Then, In a whisper that broke something deep inside him, she asked, "Then, can you be our dad? Not just tonight. Forever." The word shattered him. He had faced collapsing companies, billion-dollar risks, men who would kill reputations with a smile. None of it had ever brought him to his knees. But this simple request from a child, to brave for her years, broke through every wall he had built. His throat tightened. His vision blurred. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her small frame, and for the first time in years, Milton Kane wept. Yes, he whispered into her hair. Yes, Luna, forever. But forever had to be fought for. The following weeks became a blur of battles, courtrooms, lawyers, judges who tried to dismiss evidence, who spoke with forced neutrality while their pockets lined with silence. Milton burned through every connection he had, every resource, forcing the system to listen. Harris unearthed more names, more children, more homes. The network twisted and writhed. But the more they pulled back the shadows, the more daylight bled in. And through it all, Milton became more than protector. He became father, not by law at first, not by paper, but by presence. He sat with Jonah when nightmares woke him screaming. He learned how to braid Luna's hair, clumsy but determined. He filled the penthouse not with marble and glass, but with laughter, quiet at first, then louder, freer. For the first time in his life, Milton Kane had a family, and that was exactly what the shadows wanted to take from him. One evening, as he tucked Luna and Jonah into bed, his phone buzzed again. A video this time, grainy footage, a room, a child he didn't know, crying in the dark, a voice in the background. "You saved yours. How many will you lose trying to save the rest?" Milton's blood turned to ice. He kissed Luna's forehead, whispered good night, then stepped into the hallway, his face set like stone. The war wasn't over. It might never be over, but as long as children were stolen into silence, he would fight, because Luna had asked him to be a father. And fathers didn't quit. Fathers didn't bend. Fathers burned the dark until there was nothing left. He looked once more at the children sleeping in his guest room, their small bodies safe for now, and made his vow to the night, to the city, to the shadows themselves. "You wanted a war. You found the wrong man." The window rattled softly with the winter wind, but Milton Kane felt no fear. Not anymore, because sometimes the smallest voices carried the greatest strength, and in their voices, he had found his purpose. The night was still long, but somewhere beyond it, a dawn was waiting, and Milton Kane would make sure his children lived to see it die forever.